Hello and welcome to this demo on identifying UI elements. We'll start by exploring the concepts of target and anchor in UI automation. Then we'll learn when to use an anchor and how to indicate a target using a selection option window. Finally, we'll look at some of the options available in the selection options window, such as pause configuration, hoverable selection, and image selection mode that can help in building better UI automation. So let's dive in and learn how to identify UI elements effectively. In this demo, we'll create a simple automation process that opens the RPA Challenge website, inputs a name in the first name field, and clicks the Submit button. It's important to note that the fields on this website change position after every submission. Before we begin building the automation process, let's first explore the concept of target and anchor in UI automation. To better understand this, let's use the analogy of a home address. Just like how a home address is the target and a landmark is the anchor. In UI automation, a target is a UI element that we want to interact with, and an anchor is another element close to the target that helps to uniquely identify it. Now let's see how this concept applies in the context of UI automation. UI automation activities allow us to work with UI elements such as checkboxes, buttons, text boxes, or drop-down lists by simulating human interaction. As part of these activities, instructions are also needed to identify the correct button, checkbox, or drop-down list, or to retrieve the correct data from a web page or application. A target in UI automation can be described as an identifier. For example, a button to click, a text box to type into, or a part of a web page to copy text from. For example, in the action of clicking a Submit button, the button is the target element, the element that we want to perform the action on. Any UI element in an application can serve as a target, depending on the specific needs of the automation process. Now that we understand what a target is in UI automation, let's explore the concept of an anchor. To better understand this, let's take the example of a form, such as a Google form. When filling in the correct information in each field, we often refer to the label of the input field as a reference to identify the target. The anchor, in this case, is another UI element, such as the name of the field, that's located close to the target and helps to uniquely identify it. This ensures that the automation process can correctly identify and interact with the desired UI element. Now that we understand the concepts of target and anchor in UI automation, let's move on to using them in practice. Our next step is to build a simple automation process that opens the RPA Challenge website, inputs a name in the first name field, and clicks the Submit button. This will give us a hands-on understanding of how to indicate a target and use an anchor to uniquely identify it. Are you ready to begin building this automation? Let's start by creating a new process in our automation tool and naming it Identify UI Element. Next, we'll add Use Application or Browser Activity and indicate the application that we'll be working with, the RPA Challenge website. Next, we need to input the first name. Let's add a Type Into activity to our workflow. Now comes the crucial part of identifying the UI elements on the website. Our target, in this case, is the first name input field. We'll use the selection option window to indicate this target on the screen. The selection option window is a powerful tool that allows us to easily identify and configure the UI element that we need for our automation. It also includes a helper info area that provides useful information about any errors or remaining tasks. Once we've selected the first name input field as our target, Studio will automatically try to identify an anchor for this target. Usually, it'll be able to do so successfully. But there might be situations where we need to manually choose a reliable anchor. It's important to choose an anchor that will work in all situations so that our automation runs smoothly. As we know, targeting methods are used to identify UI elements on the screen. One feature that enables this is the unified targeting method, which is made up of at least one target and optional additional elements called anchors. This allows for identifying multiple UI elements at once. The unified targeting method includes selectors, fuzzy selectors, and images. These methods can be applied to both targets and anchors, and they can be switched between in the settings, which can be accessed by hovering over them or directly from the Selection Options window. When the robot searches for a UI element, whether it be a target or an anchor, it uses all targeting methods simultaneously and chooses the first one that successfully locates the element. The selector method is the fastest, and it looks for elements that match specific attributes, while the fuzzy method is more flexible in identifying elements. The image method looks for an exact image of the element, and it's recommended when other methods are not stable or accessible. But it can be slower and less reliable. Let's get back to project development. To confirm our target and anchor selection, we can click Confirm under the target element or simply hit Enter on our keyboard. Or we have the option to click the Confirm button in the Selection Options window. We can now add a text to a Type Into activity to enter the name and a Click activity to submit the form. Let's run the workflow and see if it works. It worked! Great! But, as we mentioned earlier, the RPA Challenge website changes the position of the fields after submitting. This can cause issues for traditional automation methods, but thanks to our use of an anchor, our automation can handle these changes and still complete the task correctly. Let's run the automation again to see if it works as expected. And it did! Great job! We can go back to the selection window to change the target, or edit the current selection by clicking on the Activity menu button and selecting Indicate Target on Screen. It's important to make sure that the target app is in the correct state when editing the anchor and target. Let's try indicating a new target for this activity, but in this case, we won't change the target and instead we'll click Cancel. To edit the target and anchor pair, we can click on its Activity menu button and select Edit Target. This is also a useful way to test if the target and anchor pair is correctly identified, as it will locate it again. Now you might be wondering, what is this target and anchor pair? Well, it's called a descriptor. We'll learn more about this in the descriptor course. Now let's see all of the options and their respective functionalities available under the target element. The delete option is used to delete the current target in case of a wrong selection. The settings option takes us to the respective window under the selection window for further enhancement if we wish to adjust the target or with an anchor. The Add Anchor option is used to add an anchor to the target. We can add a maximum of 3 anchors to a target. It's important to be mindful if you're adding more than 2 anchors, because it makes the target or UI element very specific, and it has to be detected correctly at every runtime. This can cause longer execution times or even failure of the execution. Let's add more anchors to our current selection and see the result. Let's add 1 anchor to company name. We've added all 3 anchors. Now let's try to add a 4th one. The system isn't allowing us to add the 4th one, and it's giving the warning. As of now, let's click Confirm on our selection and run it. It ran successfully because all of the UI elements were in the same position as they were whilst indicating. However, we know that the position of the element changes after submission. So let's run it again. As our selection has too many anchors, it made the target very specific, and it didn't identify the correct target as they all need to be correctly found at each runtime. Also, it took longer for its execution time, and it even failed the execution. Let's go ahead and edit the descriptor to make it more reliable. The selection window shows element not found, and all of the anchors and the target are highlighted in red, indicating that our target and anchor selections aren't correct. To fix this, we'll start by removing the additional anchor. Now we want to see how the page looks without any anchors, so we'll remove the last anchor as well. There are too many elements on the screen that look the same. Some of these elements are highlighted in yellow, which means that our selection isn't specific enough and we found some duplicate elements. To make this work, we'll add an anchor to the label of the first name input field. Now the target has a green highlight, which means that it's been identified. Let's run the workflow now. And as expected, it worked. Let's explore the final option under the target element, convert to dynamic text target. This is a great feature that allows us to target elements without worrying about their specific content. Imagine that we want to click on the first result in a search list, or a button that appears on a web page at different times. This feature will make it easy for us to target those elements. Instead of targeting based on the element's content, we can target based on its position or location. This way, even if the elements change or move, automation will still be able to find and interact with them. Great! Now let's take a closer look at some of the options in the selection window to make our process even easier. One of the options that we can use is the pause feature. With this, we can pause our selection in case we need to make any adjustments in the app before finalizing our choice. For example, we may have accidentally navigated to the wrong window on the RPA Challenge website, and the UI element that we need to edit isn't visible. In this case, it'd be a good idea to pause our selection process. We can do this by pressing F2 or by clicking on the Pause Configuration button. By default, the selection will be paused for 5 seconds, but you can adjust this time interval by changing the duration. Once the selection is paused, the countdown will begin on the timer. In our case, we'll switch to the correct page, and after 3 seconds, the selection process will automatically resume. We can confirm our selection now. Alright, let's check out another feature that could come in handy. It's called Hoverable Element Selections, and as the name suggests, it allows you to select elements on the UI that only appear when you hover over them. Take a look at the RPA Challenge page, for instance. You can only access certain options by hovering over them. To demonstrate the Hoverable Element Selection option, let's go back to Studio and add a click activity to choose Japanese for the RPA Challenge. Normally, you wouldn't be able to select the Japanese option because it's not visible. But with the Hoverable Element Selection option enabled, we can easily select it. Let's go ahead and enable the Hoverable Element Selection option in Studio. Now we can select the Japanese language option. Awesome! Now let's learn about the image selection mode. We can switch to image selection mode by pressing F3 from our keyboard. Or we can enable the image selection option from the selection option window. And then we hold the left mouse button and drag around a region from the application window to use as a target or anchor. We can use image selection mode for both anchor and target. Let's add one anchor for our target. And this brings us to the end of our demo identifying the UI element. The main key takeaway from this demo is that in UI automation, a target is a UI element that we want to interact with. And an anchor is another element close to the target that helps to uniquely identify it. By understanding the concepts of target and anchor and using them in practice to build a simple automation process, we learn how to indicate a target and use an anchor to uniquely identify it. We also learn about the selection option window, which is a powerful tool that allows us to easily identify and configure the UI element that we need for our automation. Now here's a challenge for you. Now that you're familiar with the selection options window, choose any application of your choice and create a new automation process. Identify a UI element in the application as a target and use the selection option window to indicate it on the screen. Use the selection option window to identify an anchor for the target and make sure that it's a reliable anchor that'll work in all situations. Perform a click action on the target element and test its reliability in different situations. Reflect on the process and consider how the concepts of target and anchor apply to your automation and how you can use them to make your automation more reliable and efficient. Thank you for watching and happy automation.